Today we have the amazing opportunity to have a special guest by the name of Lior Arussy. To us in the OU family, Lior has been for the last decade a mentor to many of our staff, to many of the OU and the NCSY team. But Lior in the greater world, 17 years ago, started a company by the name of Strativity. Lior today with Strativity has been the mentor, the vehicle of culture change in Fortune 100 corporations, in some of the most famous non-for-profits like the Metropolitan Museum of Art, the Kennedy Center, in industries from the automotive to the airline industry to technology industries. And we have the blessing of seeing how he sees the world, the issues that he's wrestled with, and where he sees the corporate world and the non-for-profit world going over the course of the next 2 decades. It's a real honor for us to welcome Lior Arussy.
Thank you very much for having me.
If we could start out this morning, Lior, with asking you, having worked with companies over the course of the year, over the course of the years with different divisions and multiple industries, what are some of the traits and characteristics that you've seen that define quality leadership or tier 1 leadership?
Sure. So when we look at leadership, actually, we are seeing a major evolution of what leadership really is all about. And many leaders today who have evolved over the years into leadership positions are kind of struggling to understand how to bring out their leadership. And let me explain to you why. Many of them probably started their career in the 80s or 90s. And their managers focused on, this is what I need you to do, this is how I need you to do. And their concept of leadership was basically directing people towards outcomes. When they're coming today into today's workforce, the younger generation of the workforce, those toolkits, do not work. In fact, if you're going to tell me what to do and how to do, I'm probably going to resent it. They're looking for context. They're looking for purpose. They're looking for understanding the why before they're being told how. And they're looking for a very, very different leader than what used to be before. So if the role of the leaders in the 80s and the 90s and way into the beginning of the 2000s was all about conveying confidence and clear vision and clear strategy and overall the know-it-all, what I call the answer dispenser, you bring to them all the questions and they know all the answers. We're seeing today a thirst for a totally different leadership, which comes with authenticity, which comes with vulnerability, which comes with let's work it together. And that is a very puzzling proposition for leaders who started their career in the 80s and the 90s, because they haven't seen somebody embody that type of behaviors, and they don't know how much vulnerability is okay, how much openness is okay, how much authenticity is okay. I mean, I have personal and private life. Did I sign up to share them with every employee in the name of leadership? So the whole notion of even what does it mean to be a role model or lead by example have changed from confidence-centric to very authentic, vulnerable-centric, and that is an evolution that we're going to see more and more happening out there.
So if I could ask a specific question. For instance, let's take employee manuals. People who work for AT&T or, let's say, flight attendants for airlines. They're given a manual of exactly what to do and how to do it in every specific situation. Do you see going forward that because of the nature of the workplace, those kind of rigid, objective structures will start to become more subjective, more personalized?
Let's take an example. April 7, 2017. Approximately 500,000 people flew on United Airlines that day and arrived on time to their destination. Give or take, they ate the food, the entertainment was working, and they were served by tens of thousands of employees who followed the rules. There was one passenger in Chicago O'Hare whom the gate agent told him that he needs to be removed from his seat because she needs the seat for something else. She was following the process. She was following the manual. He refused. He's a physician. He needed to be taking care of patients the next morning, and she could not guarantee him a flight on a later flight. As a result of it, she called the police. They dragged him through the aisle. We all heard the story. We all saw the viral videos. And United Airlines market capitalization dropped by 6% because of that one employee who made a choice to follow the manuals and the processes. And why is that? Because A, whatever is in manuals or in processes today will effectively be digitized eventually. The value that organizations and individuals are providing today is not in being process operators. We can digitize those. We can hand them to people via apps, via websites, and let them run their own service. Service and value is now going to emerge into the area of empowerment, which is how are you going to treat me differently? So if organizations with their processes are really captivated by the notion of sameness, we're really ushering a new era where it's going to be the individual, the uniqueness of the individual, and the ability to come up with a creative idea. Now, think about that flight that we just mentioned. So this was a flight from Chicago to Louisville. It's less than 1 hour. She could actually call Uber and say, hey, can you put him on an Uber car and drive him home? It'll take about 4 hours. Not a big deal. He would achieve his goal of being at home at night so he can serve his patients the following day. But she chose not to do that. She was hiding behind the processes. She was hiding behind the manuals because that was her safety net. She was actually taught not to think. The moment we bestow upon our employees all these processes and all these procedures, what we basically tell them is stop thinking and follow the rules. Again, everything that can be processed can be digitized. So we are actually seeing an era where value through processes will ultimately be automated. And then the question is, what is the value that we can provide, and what is the individual contribution to that value? And empowerment is now emerging as the ultimate tool that leaders will have to give to their employees so they can customize, they can personalize, they can understand and listen differently, and they can react on the spot. None of us wants to be, sent to the manager to talk about it. We want somebody who can solve our problem and can solve our problem right now. So empowerment will become the new toolkit, and that, by the way, is a very frightening tool for leaders, because they're afraid that people will make mistakes, and what if not everybody knows what to do exactly? But yet that is the new era, the era of empowerment, where the value is going to be in personalization, customization, treating one person at a time in a very unique way.
Could you give an example of a corporation that's doing that, that's gone to the empowerment model in terms of their customer service and doing it in a fine way?
So, I mean, I'll give you an example in a minute. Unfortunately, it's also a derivative not just of trust, but also of the dollar value. So, I mean, take a simple example of Starbucks. Starbucks today, by the way, have a very simple promise. You don't like your coffee, we'll replace it. You dropped it, we'll take care of it. Domino's followed with an interesting concept saying, you dropped the pizza while you picked it up from our stores, we'll replace it. Those are relatively small dollar items, so it's very easy to empower because you know that ultimately it's $20, $30, you can handle that. When it comes to bigger ticket items, that's where the bigger issue comes in. You know, how much empowerment do we give and so on and so forth. But if you look at companies anywhere from the Ritz-Carlton to the Starbucks to the Southwest, their employees are empowered. They can make the decision. I'll give you a legendary decision that is very controversial, but legendary decision that Southwest employees decided to charge 2 seats for somebody who was a little bit larger, claiming that he or she will consume 2 seats. And the airline actually stood by him, went all the way to court and said, look, he had to think about the passenger sitting next to that person who will have basically a half a seat. That was an act of empowerment that was very, very revolutionary at the time, but Southwest is known for backing up their employees because you are there in front of the situation, use your common sense, treat the customer the right way, and then we'll back you up. Not every leader is ready for that type of thing, and some of them are associating empowerment almost with a loss of power on their side because they think about their relationship with their employees in the concept of power, in which the more you give, the less you have, as opposed to the concept of influence, in which the more you give, the more you raise people above their former selves.
Where do you see the greatest challenges and at the same time the greatest opportunities for companies, for institutions in the technological era of the 21st century? You mentioned before, you have technology replacing what used to be done by labor. So where are the opportunities, where are the challenges?
So let's take an example from an industry that I know very well, which is the automotive world. We've been working in the automotive world for quite some time with a wide variety of clients. When you look at the customer journey between sales and service and buying a car and servicing a car, there are 7 stages, which has altogether about 33 touch points within them. Touch point will be a sub-stage, okay? Based on our assessment today, there are about 25 of those 33 sub-stages that are ready to be automated. Things that people today are doing, and we will no longer need them to do. such as I can schedule my own service. I don't need somebody on the phone to schedule for me a service. I can just go to an automated schedule and see what's available and schedule myself. So when you think about it in that massive change, then the question is, what is the role of the individual? And worse yet, if I'm servicing myself, what should I be paying you for that much? Then the margin erosion is coming. So the challenge comes in the era of customer empowerment, where customers are taking over more and more of the roles and responsibilities that a company used to do. Every company today has to ask themselves, how do I add value in a place where the customers are now taking over things that we used to do? And within that, what are the new skills that our employees need to have in order to get there? Because they can no longer be the process operator. Let me give you a simple example. You tried your bank on your app, and you tried, and a certain transaction did not go through. Now you call the call center, and you try to get a resolution. And what are they telling you? Do this, do that. At this point, you're saying, hey, I've already done that. You gave me the apps, remember? I've already done all of this. I'm already at a more advanced situation. Do you have an out-of-the-box solution for me? Because repeating the box, I've been in the box already. So those are the things that actually creates a higher customer expectations, because customers are saying, you sent it my way, I did my part, now you need to give me a higher level of solution that is all about out of the box. So the new world is moving from what I called, the addiction to sameness, one size fits all, we're giving processes to people, to the world of uniqueness. How do we handle every customer as an individual, as a customer of one, as a market of one, and how do we empower our employees to listen differently, to pay attention differently, to solve differently, to empathize differently, and to innovate on the spot. The innovation is now moving from labs and into the 10,000 of employees that are going to have to be there in front of the customer, innovating and customizing on the spot. Completely different new skill set.
Would you be willing to give some examples in terms of different companies you've worked with in this area where you've tried to transform the customer service experience?
Sure. I'll give you one interesting example. We talked about it in the past, which is my favorite. It's Mercedes-Benz. They came to us, 25,000 employees who are working for 360 independent dealers. Every dealer does whatever they want. And what we challenge them with is stop just following the processes, because quite honestly, these are not regular car owners. There is an emotional connection when somebody's willing to spend that much money on a luxury car. Because if they want to get from point A to point B, they can drive a Kia, they can drive a Toyota, they don't have to drive a Mercedes. And the way that we prepared their mindset, and we said, look, you need to focus on the emotional, and you need to focus on the power you do have. Everybody has power that they have and power that they don't have. Focus on the emotional, focus on the power you do have, and your task is not to complete the process. Your task is to create a story that your customers are going to go and spread, because we live in social media world. And I'll give you an interesting example. A customer called in and he said, I'm bringing my car for service and I would like to get a loaner. And the service consultant said, oh, that's wonderful, we'll arrange for a loaner for you. And he said, no, I have a very specific request. I want to get an S-Class. Now, the typical process answer would be, nice try. There are no S-Class in the loaner fleet, because S-Class is the highest level of their cars, and we don't provide them as loaners. They're too expensive. That would have been the process. Mm-hmm. If that employee would have been a process operator, that would have been the answer. Instead, the employee is following the same logic that we just talked about. Focus on the emotional, focus on the power you do have. And he says to the customer, sir, is everything okay? Why do you need an S-Class? Are you celebrating something? And the customer said, actually not. I was diagnosed with cancer. I need to drive to Sloan Kettering Hospital in New York City. It's 3 hours from my home. And the roads are bumpier. So if you're going to give me your regular loaners, it's going to hurt me. Is there any way you can get me an S-Class? Now it became personal. Now there is an emotional to emotional connection. It doesn't matter how much money that customer has. This is an emotional connection. And the service consultant is thinking, what can I do? What can I do? I have to find him an S-Class. After an hour of debating and everything, he calls the customer and said, when do you need the car? And he said, 7 o'clock. I was planning tomorrow morning, 7 o'clock. I was planning to come drop my car off and get the car. And the service consultant says to him, you stay home. I got you an S-Class. It's not from the loaner fleet. It's from certified pre-owned. So it's about 2 years old, but it is an S-Class nevertheless. Very creative thinking, right? And the following morning, 7 a.m., customer waits for them. They show up with an S-Class, but then he noticed something very different. There's another person there, And then the service consultant is taking his keys, taking his car, and says, by the way, sir, today you're sitting in the back. Open the door for the passenger's seat in the back, said, you're sitting here today, we have refreshments, we have food for you, we're driving you to Sloan Kettering Hospital. And we're going to be waiting for you until you're going to finish your treatment, and then we're going to be driving you back home. The customer started to cry and could not stop. And he was mumbling, my own family doesn't have time to take me to the hospital, and my car dealership does? Now, this is not something you can script. This is something that you need to activate a personal choice of an employee to make a difference. That's the difference between process operators and impact creators. And that is a whole new world that leaders need to learn. How do I activate personal choices? That story, needless to say, became viral. And by the way, in the first year, we created 5,000 stories just like that, from people who made the choice to create a story to treat an individual as a unique person and not as a process, not trying to force them into the process, but rather rise up and understand the process in this case doesn't work. Instead of hiding behind it, I'm going to rise up. I'm going to activate my superpower. I'm going to connect to the person. Now, needless to say, when you have 5,000 stories like that, now it becomes a corporate culture. Now it becomes the new way that we do things. When you have one story like that, it's a fluke. When you got 5,000, it's a culture. It's the way we do things. And that's just one example. I can give you examples of, for example, a customer who calls a health insurance, and his medicine is out of the coverage, and the person on the phone is saying, sir, I'm really sorry. I see your situation. I'll pay for it. I'm like, seriously? A call center agent is now paying for a patient's medicine because he doesn't want to have that patient going without the prescription. And the story goes like that and on and on and on. So whenever you move people from process operators to impact creators, show them the power they do have, show them how to connect emotionally, and treat every individual as a person, as a human being, not as a budget, not as a wallet. This is where the miracle starts to happen. And this is what we call the world of stories as opposed to the world of processes.
And this is the goal of Strativity. And this is what it's like working with thousands and thousands of employees in different divisions of different companies.
So in a sense, when we go to every leader, we ask them a very simple question. What is your strategy for next year? How are you going to grow? How are you going to run the business? And they tell us about the strategy. And we say, what do you think are your chances of success? And they give me somewhere between 75 to 90% success ratio. In fact, we did a benchmark study with Harvard Business Review where we benchmarked 422 companies, and we asked them, how successful were your strategies? You launched them, how successful? The number was shocking, it was 9%.
9%?
9 out of 100.
Wow.
91% of programs fail. They either have to water them down, they have to change them, and it's not because the budget was not there, it's not because the time was not there, it's not because governance was not there. You know why it was? Because the people didn't get it and didn't want to do it. And what we teach the CEOs is you need to understand that Susie from accounting is running your company. She's the one in front of a customer as much as Heather in the call center and David at the retail branch and Joanne who's the salesperson. They are the ones who are making thousands of decisions every day. And if they will decide to rise up, then you have a great strategy that's going to happen. And if they decide to slow down your strategy, they're going to hold you hostage and your strategy is not going to take off. The problem is that most organizations in the traditional leadership top-down approach that we talked about before think that if they made a decision, it's going to cascade all the way to the employees and eventually it's going to happen. Why? Because they said so. But that's going back to what we started, which is the leadership traits today is about inviting people to excellence, not forcing people into processes. So for us, you ask me what we do, we help organizations move from their strategic intent all the way to results in the fastest lane by operating or activating the human factor of the organization. And by the way, that resistance can also happen on your customer side. So it can be your customer, it can be your employees, but these are the areas where strategies ultimately fall apart and we cannot rise up and deal with customers in the way that they want to be dealt with and ultimately improve margins, improve loyalty, improve retention, and actually reduce cost of acquiring new customers.
You've had a number of books that are bestsellers where you speak about this. You speak about the culture of change and how to motivate people. Would you share some of what went into creating these books?
Sure.
And who's reading them?
Sure. So My books were actually geared toward the same line of thinking, which is I'm not writing for CEOs. I'm writing for the employees. I'm writing for the people who are struggling with the change, struggling with how to elevate their roles, and how can they position themselves to be relevant and to be applicable in the evolving workplace. Because it is a very, very scary workplace. You see a lot of roles that are being redefined as we speak. As we look at roles like insurance agents or travel agents, I mean, some of these roles are today automated and we do them ourselves. We don't even talk to someone. So there are a lot of roles that are going through evolution, and in our work, what we focus on is that notion of personal choices. Each and every one of us has a choice. We cannot play victim anymore to realities. We cannot blame the CEO. I remember talking to in a focus group, talking to employees in one company, and employees said to us, "Do you see what the CEO is doing to us with all this digital transformation?" And I said, "Stop. Did you ever stop for a second to understand that digital happened to your CEO the same way that it happened to you? He didn't plan for Facebook. He didn't plan for Google. He didn't plan for Instagram. He didn't plan for social media. You know, it hit him as a human being just like it hit you. But what is the difference? He's trying to do something about it, and you're trying to fight it. And you know what? There's a very simple rule. No one wins against change. The only thing you can do is get off the train and say, I'm not playing anymore. But change is going to happen. We can shape change. We can apply change. We can bring change to help us. But ultimately, we bring it to a place for individuals of what is your personal choice? What are you going to do about it? Because it's not going to go away. And you playing, games and trying to be a victim in the process is not going to help anybody. Now, what we are helping them in, let's take Next is Now, which is the latest book that I published. One of the things when we talk about how to embrace change and how to turn change into an accelerator of your life mission as opposed to something that's taking it away from it. What we discovered is that part of the reason why people are fighting change is not because they're afraid of the future. This is the common thinking. They're actually struggling with the past. And here's what we found out. If you come as a bank, for example, and you shut down branches and you shut down cashiers and you're saying, hey, we don't need cashiers anymore, people can do it in their ATM machines, somebody who was a cashier for 20 years is now facing an existential crisis. Because what people hear when they hear the word change, they hear a negative judgment on their past.
So you're irrelevant.
Not only, but the last 20 years of all my work is not relevant. You're writing it off. Where do I file those last 20 years? Mm-hmm. Where do I file the last 20 years that I did that? It's true with a software. I used that software. Now you shift to another software. So what does it mean about all my work until now? They hear change and they hear a departure from the past. And what happened is because many of them are associating themselves with the processes and the tools that they are using and not with the impact that they're making, they're struggling because they don't want to let go of the tool. Because the tool defined them, because they were the software guy, they were the IT guy, they were the cashier. And what we help them in Next is Now, I'm talking about how to do the big split between the impact and the tools. So as a banker, for example, once upon a time you used Abacus. Then they put this lovely calculator with a strip, a paper strip. And then they put a desktop, a computer, and now you have an app. The Abacus didn't define you. In the same way that the app doesn't define it. These are tools. What you are is you're helping people live their financial dreams, fulfill their financial dreams, live their life dreams. You're helping somebody finance his daughter's wedding. You did it 20 years ago with whatever tools you had then, and you're doing it now with whatever tools you have now. It didn't change who you are. Your mission stays the same. So by creating that powerful bridge between the past and the future through the impact, and through our ability to impact the life of people, we're freeing them to experiment with different tools. So the tools do not become who they are. The tools just are tools. And it creates what we call change resilience. It creates a better flexibility to adapt in speed and scope to whatever change is coming and actually be ahead of the change as opposed to being behind the change.
Can you share with us your observations in the non-for-profit world? And when I say specifically, here in the Jewish world, you've had a chance to observe whether it was various synagogues, elementary schools, high schools, other Jewish institutions that are fundraising arms for Israeli hospitals, yeshivot, etc. Looking at the way we do things, and it's a broad question, and if you'd like, you could focus on specific areas.
So
where we in the non-for-profit world, where we who are engaging the community, could really be doing a better job in terms of servicing the community?
So I think I'm going to start with maybe a broader context, and then I'm going to go into our nonprofit world. So my broader context will be the other nonprofits that we work with. We work with the Kennedy Center, which service arts and culture in Washington, D.C. We work with the Metropolitan Museum of Art, the Met. Recently, we're working with the LA Philharmonic and the Music Center in LA. So we got exposure to the world of arts, culture, nonprofits, and so on and so forth. And there is, first and foremost, a skewed and an incorrect view of what is a customer. Because the world of nonprofit, by definition, as we say, nonprofit, almost equates automatically to whatever we give you, you should be happy. Because we're not for profit. You're not really paying money, and money is a dirty word in our world. So we are facing right then and there a skewed perception of what is a customer, how do we treat a customer, do we even call them customers, or they should be grateful that they are getting access to the greatness of what we do. And the example that we had with the Met, for example, the Met had a very interesting policy of pay as you wish for years. You come, there's a recommended donation, either you pay it or you don't, or you can pay whatever you want. And about 12 years ago, 63% of the visitors, 7 million visitors at the Met, paid full price. That number dropped to 12% last year. 71% drop in people willing to pay. And you're kind of going to say, wait a minute, the product didn't change. It's the same old stuff from Egypt. It's not like we're supposed to make them any newer, or it's the old stuff. That's why you come to see it. And yet customers basically voted with their wallet to say, you're not relevant. You need to be relevant. You want me to pay full price? You've got to raise the game. I think it's true for all type of nonprofits. All type of nonprofits are mission-based. They let the purpose lead them, which is all the right thing to do, but they still need to define their congregants or their parents in the Jewish schools as customers. They are customers, not just because they are paying the dues, but because the definition of customer is not just somebody who buys something from me. The definition of a customer is somebody in need, and you're in a position of service. So a teacher is serving a customer. A nurse is serving a customer. We call them a parent, we call them a patient, but they're the same individual. So right then and there, I think the whole orientation to understand that the people we serve are customers, they are consuming our services, they do have expectations. And again, the notion in nonprofit is because they're not paying top dollars or because we are not for profit, customer expectations should be kind of lower, should be adjusted accordingly. But then, of course, when we start talking about donors, then the numbers are not as small. And by the way, donors are a form of customers. I had a whole speech at the Tate Museum in London just 3 weeks ago about the whole donor strategy. Because the Tate, by the way, is free of charge. It's all donations. And so they are dependent on donors. And we talk about how are donors thinking about their responsibilities, how to activate donors. And the other part that I think we need to start understanding is that people have choices. We treat Judaism and our nonprofits as a place of no choice. So, accept what you get. It's like you're going to a kosher restaurant in a godforsaken nowhere, you're going to get the same hummus and the same shawarma because they expect, hey, all the Jews are eating hummus and shawarma and they'll be accepting any quality of food because we're kosher. I think that we need to start thinking in the context of customers, not look at it as a dirty word, not look at it as a negative word. It's a person in need. That's the definition of a customer. How much they are paying, that's a different story, but it's not about the money as much as it is about earning their trust, earning their commitment, earning their compliance, earning their willingness to contribute back. There are a variety of ways that you can look at how your customer relationships are going to happen. But I believe it's a new message for a principal to think about parents as customers, to think about students as customers. But it does set a very specific way of looking at what are their expectations and how do I live up to that. Because if I'm going to step right now to any synagogue or to any Jewish school, and I'm going to ask them, what are your customer expectations and how do you measure that you achieve that? That's a simple question in any relationship between a provider and a recipient. What are their expectations and how do you know that you deliver it? I would bet you 99% of them do not have a mechanism to either capture the customer expectations, measure their staff and their activities against those. And without that, it's a favor business.
which means it's run in a very schlock, haphazard way.
It's a volunteering business. It's not a it's not as professional as it should be. And by the way, donors look at that. We work with a nonprofit, and one of the things that I told them, I said, abolish all general expenses donations. Everything has to be attached to a program. They need to know that if they stop donating for that program will drop. Or if they stop sponsoring that kid will be lost. There has to be a very clear, direct line between what they do and a sense of ownership. And they today do not collect money for general expenses. Everything is aligned to that. Why? It creates a sense of ownership, creates a sense of accountability. Donors today are business people. They would like to see your annual report. They would like to see how much you're paying people. They would like to see how much is going to general expenses. And they are absolutely justified in doing that. They're running businesses, they're making investments that way, and they're expecting in the nonprofit world to see a similar level of transparency and credibility. And I would, again, go back to any nonprofit says, how do you build credibility with your stakeholders? Did you map your stakeholders? What is your value to your stakeholders? All of these things are part of professionalizing nonprofit and not using the word or the term nonprofit as an excuse for non-professional. As in, you get what you pay for. We have an opportunity here. I think that start thinking that way should really challenge every rabbi to how do you measure success in your community with your congregants? You know, I tell leaders, culture is what happens when you leave the room. I joke with my employees that as a CEO, I have one handicap. I'd never know if my jokes are funny or not. Because I don't know if they're laughing because I'm the CEO or if my jokes are funny. And that's a handicap that I will live with because as a CEO, there's always a blinder around that. If we apply to our Jewish world, culture in our world is what people say when the rabbi is not around. Yeah. Okay? So what do they say? Are they inspired? Or are they talking about the next scotch they're gonna buy and have fun with? How do you measure the impact that you're creating on people? And I think some of it has to come in the context of actions, not just perceptions, not just inspiration. But, you know, in the same way that when I will make a commitment at the end of the year and I'll say, I want to lose weight and live a healthy lifestyle, it's not just a mindset. I have to do something about it. You know, just having a mindset of healthy lifestyle is not going to help me drop any pounds. And culture, and for that matter, what we have in our world is a combination of beliefs, but also behaviors. And how do we help people make those choices to make those behaviors? We can force them. We can threaten them with punishments in the world to come. We need to activate their personal choices to rise up to the higher version of themselves. That's where the parallelism exists. It's the same kind of choices. It's about living with values and testing your values. You can't come and say, my values are X, Y, and Z unless they were actually tested. Have you given up? Have you sacrificed something for that value?
Where have you seen in the nonprofit world positive models of this? Could be in the Jewish world, the non-Jewish world. Where have you seen what you would say is almost a poster child for employing strategies that lead to the attainment of goals, people service that facilitate, kind of, the term used was inspire or transformative behavior from those who are the end user, the consumer?
So I'm a little bit biased in the example I'm going to give you because it's an organization that I actually worked with, but I will tell you what I find to be probably the closest thing that I've seen to that level of professionalism, and that is an organization called Friendship Circle in Essex County in Livingston, New Jersey. And from day one, when Rabbi Zalman came to me and we were starting to think about it, it started as a volunteering group that sends kids to volunteer at kids with special needs, and it was wonderful. But he wanted to grow. He had a vision, and we talked about what is your value to the community. Special need kids are a sub-segment of the community. How do we impact the whole community? How do we create a professional world in which we're being held accountable to results and so on and so forth. And we start measuring everything and we start tracking things and so on and so forth. And throughout the years, one of the visions that we built was not just the support for the special need kids, but creating and growing the next generation of leaders. So the volunteers became actually the recipients and not just the givers. And what Rabbi Zalman did is really build the organization with a high level of accountability and transparency from day one. Where's the money going? How do we use it? How many hours did we create? I mean, he was literally creating a P&L to share with everyone. It was the most transparent situation you would see. In the dinner, that's exactly what you're going to see. It's exactly what are our numbers, what we have done, and how we have done. And as he built his vision, today they are completing a massive construction and a building to become their center of activities with connections all over. And from day one, I also challenge him, don't think Jewish standards. Think big. Bring the governor, bring the UN, bring anybody that you believe can help you achieve your goals. Bring Rutgers. Don't settle for what's available to you, what's the easy way. Go bigger, build bigger. And that's exactly what he did. If I go and take another program that's close to me, is my dear friend Rabbi Katz in NCSY, New Jersey. What he did is he broke the boundaries of saying, I'm going to do what NCSY always does. And his Chesed mission is a great example of collaborating with non-Jewish organizations, all the way to Habitat for Humanity or whatever, and having this mindset that says that if there is a crisis right now in Houston, it's my problem and I need to send people there. And irrespective of the fact that other rescue organizations did not even show up there, and yet they're flying with hammers and tools and hard hats, and they're going to be there because there's a sense of responsibility that's bigger than New Jersey and the kids and so on and so forth. And I think that's another example of rising up to the better self, the better version of ourselves, where they look at the opportunity bigger and greater and benchmark themselves bigger and greater than the narrow perspective of accepting that it's Jewish, so it has to be in a certain way.
If I may ask, and again, I don't know if this is something that you can share or not, and if possibly some of the cases that are in some of your books, some of the companies you've worked with, the challenges you had, the strategies you employed towards bringing about the change that the company was looking for. If you could give a few examples.
Sure. So
in the past, you've mentioned the Mercedes example. Maybe
so
a few others.
Yeah, let me give you the Met. So the Met approached us after they made a decision to basically charge full price. And there are two problems. A, the New York Times is going to probably not going to receive it in a nice way. So they were afraid of negative responses over there. But the second issue was that thousands of their employees saw this new strategy as a betrayal for the mission, which is access to art. What, are you going to start telling people not to have access? I mean, we joined, we sacrificed, we are taking lower salaries because we are here for the access to art. You got hundreds of volunteers saying, we are volunteering every day. Now you're going to turn it into a business? That's a serious issue. Yet at the same time, it was a major hole in the budget. They needed the money. And our challenge was, how do we activate the people, not just to accept, but to embrace and understand that it's not a betrayal of the mission, but it's actually acceleration of the mission. And the approach that we take in every one of our projects is what we call, what are the cynical voices? Because usually people are stuck, and the cynical voices will guide us as to where they're stuck. What are the issues? And we spend hours and hours interviewing one-on-one and in focus groups with employees, trying to understand where are you coming from, where are your struggles, where are your emotional entanglements. The moment you identify those cynical voices, then we build our program from a messaging, activities, empowerment, innovation to preempt those things. So the moment the program is being launched, they see that we've already incorporated those cynical voices, and we are staging for them literally a choice. The program basically staged for them, here are the facts, here are your emotions, here's where we need to go, this is your choice. We're not forcing people. We're not an exclamation mark. We're a question mark. Our goal is to bring the right question in the right context for people so they can reach, hopefully, the right conclusions. But it has to be their own choice. And within 3 months, we were able to mobilize the employees. And on March 1st, when the new policy was launched, we had less than 1% of visitors turning away and not paying, which is a phenomenal number.
Incredible.
People who just 3 months ago, actually 2 weeks ago, wouldn't pay, and now do understand why. And we knew that if the employees would even blink in the wrong way, people will turn away. if employees will not be passionate about it, it will be turned away. Let me give you another example. So we had the privilege of actually designing a cancer treatment center from scratch before it was actually built. A new technology at the time called proton therapy, very, very accurate treatment. It just touched the tumor and everything else. But the CEO of the company said, look, I don't want to be known for the technology. I want to be known for customer experience. I want to be known as the best place to come for treatment. Why? Because one day my technology will become obsolete and there will be another technology. I don't want to lose my market because I was known for the technology. I want to be known for customer experience. And we thought it would be an easy one. And then very quickly we discovered that the cynical voices were much stronger than we thought they were.
Referring to the staff.
Referring to the staff. So some of the nurses told us point blank, we do not want to engage with them emotionally because we don't want to go to another funeral. It's a painful thing for us. We can't do that. So we are deliberately building barriers. We are process operators. We're doing what needs to be done, but we're keeping our distance. We need it in order to be safe. We need not to know them that much, just in case. Needless to say, that's an unacceptable situation, but you also need to understand that their cynical voices were legitimate. And they did not have any tools of how to deal with those emotions when, grieving happens and, loss happens and so on and so forth. And again, using the emotional, with physicians, we had one physician actually who said we caught him saying to a patient, look, stop your prayers because your God is the reason why you have it. I'm your new God. Get yourself into the treatment room. Like, seriously? All they wanted is just 2 minutes to meditate and to get their head in the right place. And that was another one that we didn't expect. But again, some physicians feel self-importance and they feel that their Harvard degree bestow upon them semi-God skill set. We built a program, again, a combination of training, empowerment, innovation, a whole program that, again, situated for them a choice, which is, what are you going to do here? And the interesting thing was this CEO said to us, I don't want customer surveys. Don't show me that people like me because of color. I want to see natural responses of people. I mean, make it natural. I want to see that they actually were impressed. Basically what he's saying is, if you send them a survey, you kind of beg for the score. If you don't, and they still compliment us and tell us that we've done a good work, then that's for me the most natural way to go about it. And we started to see people posting on social media and everything else. And then within a year, we started to see a very, very interesting trend in which some patients tattooed the logo of the center on their body in appreciation. Now, I know it's not allowed in Judaism, but nevertheless, think about that. This is not a Harley-Davidson fan. This is a cancer treatment center. And those things send like shockwaves to the organizations. I mean, the nurses started to tear up because it was a form of expression, of commitment, of gratefulness, of appreciation that they've never seen before. It's beyond just saying thank you. It's people are saying, your life and my life are now tied together. So these are examples. Again, the process is the same. Is whatever transformation or change you're trying to do, what are the cynical voices that are holding them back? Some of them are rational, some of them are emotional. How can we show them the mission and repurpose it? And how do we give them a toolkit of understanding, innovation, empowerment that can really take them to a place of, it's my choice and I'm choosing to be the better version of myself. Not the victim, not the passive, not the process operator, not the one hiding behind the manuals, but the one who's saying, it's me, it's my time, it's my customer, I'm on it.
Are you willing to share some of the most difficult challenges you've had in terms of change in culture? Sure.
So first of all, you always run into a couple of things. The first one is organizations do not fully understand what culture is. Okay, again, let's start with the definition. Culture is what happens when the CEO leaves the room. The CEO doesn't have full view of what's really happening in the organization because they get a very, very well-oiled, well-orchestrated picture. So getting to those truths in the full picture is probably the most painful thing. Some CEOs respond favorably, others are not. Our approach is, as when we deal with senior management, is what we call respectful and firm. We're very respectful of who you are and what you achieve, but we're not here to give you an award. We're here to talk about what the real issues are. And some CEOs naturally will resist. They didn't sign up for it. They didn't sign up for the full truth. They were hoping for some pixie dust that we can just sprinkle over people and they'll start smiling nicer to people. And they don't understand that you can't force someone to smile sincerely. You can force them to smile, but not sincerely. Sincerely is a personal choice. Sincerely is me choosing to do that. Now, if you take a look today at what corporate is hoping to get from their employees, caring, creativity, leadership, thinking outside the box, sincerity, all of these things are personal choices. You don't have KPIs for that. No employee has, you need to produce 34 creative ideas in the next quarter. You can do that. Yet all of these things, the future of the workforce and the future of value is dependent on what employees will make as personal choices. That is a very harsh and painful message to a CEO who labored for 30 years to get to the top of the pyramid and now discover that all of a sudden he's dependent on the lowest level people in the organization. So some of them would resist, some of them will push back, some of them were hoping for a for a shortcut or something like that. Some of them do not understand the financial implications of not doing that. So I had a discussion recently with a CEO when we talked about the fact that his organization is paralyzed by not being empowered. He said, I'm not too worried about that. And I said, I am, because you know what they have? The opposite of empowerment. I asked him, what is the opposite of empowerment? He said, no empowerment. I said, no. The empowerment to say no. That means they are stalling activities, strategies, behaviors. Your people are actually empowered to stall. The lack of empowerment is not a status quo. The lack of empowerment is actually the organization staying behind. That's the empowerment of no. So some leaders are hoping for shortcuts. Some leaders are hoping that just a quick training is going to solve the problem. Some of them are hoping for pixie dust that's gonna be there. And these are tough conversations about how serious they are, how much they want to take it. They talk the big talk, but then they have other considerations. And some of them are afraid that the process is not going to be successful. We have a lot of them who are freaking out, saying, I wasn't born Starbucks, I wasn't born Disney. It's great that Disney does it, but I'm selling widgets to factories. I don't have Mickey Mouse here. So many of them are struggling with trying to understand how to connect the dots. And there are moments where we would just say, look, guys, it's probably not going to work, and we'll walk away. And we have walked away from few engagements based on the notion that you're not ready, and that's okay. And when you'll be ready, we'll talk about it. But when you're not ready, there's no point.
That's when there's a real sense of inhibition, and there's a sense of leeriness on behalf of the CEO to go to places they maybe didn't want to go or weren't ready to go to. How about on the other end, when it's the employees?
Oh, the employees, I wouldn't call it failure, but we are getting so much hostility at the beginning, all the way to how much are they paying you and why don't they give me another raise instead of paying you? The hostility and the pushback is absolutely critical. Now,
you're saying that's a given.
That's a given. We're stepping into that. It's like you going to a sewage and just putting your hand in there and willing to see what comes out. Now, the way we look at it in order to actually stabilize the situation, I want you to imagine a bell curve, okay? So whenever we come with our messages, there's a 10% that we just say customer experience and they're already running. You don't need to tell them what to do. They know what to do. They just got a permission to be amazing. You got another 10% that no matter what you're going to do, they're never going to change. They didn't sign up for it. They don't want to do it, and so on and so forth. And then what you need to do is not to focus on that 10%, because you'll never win them over. Your real battle is the 80% who are sitting there and saying, is this for real? Do we believe the optimists or do we believe the pessimists? Are we going to go with the visionaries or are we going to go with the cynics? And that is the real battleground. And if we win them over, we can make the organization shift, and this 10% will ultimately sign off and leave. But you need to stay very focused there. And the best way that somebody described it to me, he said, look, Lior, we're 5,000 employees here. Each one of us on average has 10 years of experience. So what you're trying to do is change 50,000 years of experience. Is this possible? That's where they come from. Their experience, their past defined them. Their past is their formula for the future. We all know that it's not. Yahoo was not the formula for Google. Google was a brand new concept. Google was not the formula for Facebook. Facebook was a brand new concept. So the threat of using the past to guide the future is quite problematic. And what we try to do is do a process that the best way I can describe it is, I'll say it in Hebrew and then I'll translate it because I learned it in Hebrew first. Hayashan yitchadesh v'achadash yitkadesh. The old will be renewed and the new will be sanctified. What does it mean? We need to move with new skill sets. But at the same time, what are they saying? The new skill sets are brand new, and I don't know if it's going to work. And that's why we need to sanctify them. We need to sanctify them with the experience from the past. That's the sanctification concept of bringing our knowledge to sanctify the new. And I know some people are going to...
That goes back to the bank employee.
Yes.
You're about servicing the customer and
Yeah.
making their wedding and making their home, etc.
That's right. So what is the sanctification? The sanctification is connecting it to the purpose of how we're making an impact on the customer. So it's not an app for the sake of app. It's an app in order to help you achieve that goal. So your mission stays. It's actually your constant. And the moment you have a good constant, it's much easier to change the tools. So what we are trying to build in our programs is, and again, it's not just communication. It has to be also tools and empowerment and training. And by the way, some of them are embarrassed to use the new tools because they don't know how it's going to look like. I remember an interesting anecdote that somebody shared with me. We work with Cadillac as well. And we encourage the sales consultants to spend the time to teach the Cadillac app for customers. And one of them called us back and he said, you won't believe what just happened. I just trained an 80 years old customer on an app, on just how to use the app, the Cadillac app. And he said, and he started to tear up and he said he's going to call his grandson. And I said, why would you call your grandson? He said, because I want to tell him I'm using an app. Because now my grandson will think I'm cool. And that's when he understood it wasn't about the app. It's about making the customer feeling cool for his grandson. Who wouldn't want it as a grandfather? And that's a privilege. We're in a position of service. They're in a position of need. And we're here at the juncture between our skills and where we are needed the most to help someone. Mm-hmm. If that's not a privilege, I don't know what a privilege is. If that's not a place of power, I don't know what a place of power is. And that's what we're trying to help employees see. And then leadership understand that when the employees understand that and act on it, that's how you build brand equity. That's how you build profitability. That's how you build customer retention. That's how you build customer relationships. That's how you build loyalty. That's how you build more advocacy and more referrals. It comes from those choices, those activities. And if they do that consistently, then the rest will follow.
I would just like to conclude by saying that as a volunteer, Lior, and he has a tremendously busy life. You know, he's literally working on 3 different continents. But as a volunteer, he's been a huge friend to, as you mentioned, Rabbi Eitan Katz, who, in terms of what he has done for New Jersey NCSY, as well as 2 programs that Lior mentored him in. One is the Chesed missions that have become renowned throughout North America, as well as the LEAD program, which develops the future generation of the Jewish people, takes young adolescents and gives them the skills, the experiences to really impact and make a difference and be our leaders in the next generation. And on behalf of the OU and the NCSY family, we're profoundly grateful for
Thank you.
Not the tens, but the hundreds of hours that you've given to us in New Jersey NCSY and in terms of many other projects as well.
Again, it's a privilege to be part of it. They're doing amazing work, and it's a privilege to be there whenever they need me in order to provide a little bit of insight. What I always told Rabbi Katz, look, ideas are a dime a dozen. You actually make them happen. So, I can provide you with the guidance and the ideas, but, we need people that can actually believe in making them happen.
And the last question I'd like to ask is if you just share for the audience 2 or 3 of the books that may help them, whether it's in their culture at home, their culture at the workplace, or whether it's their culture and their volunteerism for non-for-profits. A few of the books that I've had the opportunity and others have had the opportunity to read, what the goal of the books are and where they can access those books.
Sure. So the first book that I'll talk about is Exceptionalize It. Exceptionalize It is a very unique book. I mean, writing it was actually more difficult because every chapter is one page. So think about it almost as a daily refresher, as a daily refuel. And Exceptionalize It is focusing on what we call the art of memories. We live in a world of stories and memories. It's whatever people remember that will ultimately guide their next actions. So as an individual, as a parent, as a rabbi, as a person in the workplace, are you creating memories that cause people to come back? When they just finish a conversation with you, was that a 10 seconds memory or was that a 10 years memory? 10 years memory, they'll come back. 10 seconds memory, they forgot all about it. So how do we build ourselves to create memories that will leave an impact on people? How do we connect emotionally to people? And the book is built based on four categories: the customer, the manager, you, and success. Success also sometimes can be problematic because when we become successful, we take it for granted and we think we are in an ultimate place. So Exceptionalize is a great kind of a refresher reminder around the art of memories and how do you create yourself as a relevant person to the people that you engage with. It can be your children, your students, your congregants, or your customers. Next is Now is really looking at embracing change and the challenge that people are dealing with change. And I wrote Next is Now as a book for employees, for individuals, not for leaders. In fact, only chapter 10 start to talk to leaders. Because I wanted to have a direct conversation based on, we've engaged with over 1 million employees so far. And we've seen their struggles, we've seen their arguments, we've seen their pushbacks, we've seen their emotional entanglements. And Next is Now was written as a direct kind of a conversation between me and them of saying, guys, we've got to get out of victimhood. We've got to be in charge of our change, because if we are not in charge of our change, change will be in charge of us. The only way to predict change is to be part of creating it. And here's a 5-step approach to deal with it, understand it, build the muscle of change resilience so you stay relevant in the marketplace. Both of them are available on Amazon or other websites. I know that Next is Now is also in the bookstores everywhere. It was in some of the airport bookstores. So they're available where people are interested. Next is Now is also available as an audiobook and as a Kindle version as well. So they're available for those who want to be inspired.
Thank you very much.
My pleasure.